He had the job, the charm, and the secret affair with his female boss, but he had no idea the real player was right under his roof. This shocking Nigerian drama tells the story of Kunle, a Lagos man who thought he had it all, until the truth came crashing down. Get ready for betrayal, power play, and one wife's epic revenge that left everyone speechless. If you love dramatic twists, Nigerian relationship sagas, and power moves from unexpected characters, this one's for you. Backhand index pointing right, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping Niger stories every week. Kunle was the kind of man who turned heads the moment he walked into a room. Tall, well-dressed, and blessed with a smooth tongue and a smirk that always said he knew more than he was letting on. Working at one of the top consulting firms in Lagos, he had built a reputation as a high performer, both in the office and outside it. To most people, he was a man who had it all. A steady job, a decent home in Lekki, and a beautiful, soft-spoken wife named Amaka. But Kunle had a secret. Behind closed doors, his charm had crept far beyond professionalism, right into the private world of his boss, Mrs. Williams. A commanding woman in her 40s with a sharp mind and an even sharper wardrobe, Mrs. Williams was everything the junior staff feared and admired. But with Kunle, her tough exterior melted into something much softer, something forbidden. Their affair had started after a late-night project meeting. One compliment turned into prolonged eye contact, and soon, whispered conversations became secret rendezvous at high-end hotels and her private penthouse. Kunle justified it all in his head, not just small enjoyment, no strings attached. He felt powerful, like he was on top of the world. His boss adored him. His wife never suspected a thing. He was playing the game and winning, or so he thought. Every day, he came home to Amaka with a clean shirt and a crooked smile. She welcomed him with warm meals and gentle words, never hinting at the fire brewing behind her calm eyes. She watched him quietly, never confronting, never accusing, but always observing. Kunle mistook her silence for ignorance. He didn't know that behind her quiet demeanor, Amaka was piecing together a story of her own. But for now, Kunle remained blissfully unaware, fully immersed in his fantasy. Thinking he was the master player in a game that was, in truth, far bigger than he imagined. Amaka had always been the kind of woman people described as too quiet to cause trouble. Calm, composed, and with a grace that came naturally, she was the type to listen more than she spoke, to watch more than she reacted. It was this quietness that Kunle had come to rely on, a dangerous assumption that her silence meant she was clueless. But Amaka was far from clueless. She had noticed the subtle changes. The faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on Kunle's shirts. The way he suddenly became protective of his phone, jumping at every notification like he was hiding a winning lottery ticket. The late nights at the office that didn't quite match his company's workload. The way his smile no longer reached his eyes. She said nothing. Instead, she listened, carefully. She studied the way he moved, the tone in his voice when he mentioned his boss, the smirk he didn't know he wore when he thought he was getting away with something. At first, the betrayal hurt. She cried alone, swallowed the bitterness, and prayed for clarity. But clarity didn't come in the form of an apology. It came in the form of a plan. Amaka stopped asking questions. She stopped fussing over his late returns. She even started dressing better, stepping out more, smiling wider. Kunle took it as her being submissive, as proof that he had everything under control. He didn't know that every new dress she wore was part of a bigger picture. Every smile she gave was a strategy. Every night she spent awake was time spent calculating her next move. Then, one evening, she attended a women's conference hosted by a popular businesswoman, none other than Mrs. Williams, Kunle's boss. There, Amaka shook hands with powerful people and smiled graciously through the crowd. And that was when she saw him, David Williams, the husband of her husband's lover. Tall, quiet, and strangely removed from the pomp of his wife's event, David had an energy that intrigued Amaka. And the moment their eyes met, something shifted. Not attraction, No, it was recognition. The recognition of two people who had both been played. Two people who carried secrets. Two people standing at the edge of a dangerous truth. Amaka smiled politely. David nodded in return. And just like that, her silence began to speak louder than Kunle would ever imagine. David Williams was not a man who sought the spotlight, despite being married to a woman who lived in it. He preferred silence over speeches, solitude over social events, and meaningful glances over empty conversations. While Mrs. Williams dazzled Lagos with her brilliance and boldness, David remained her silent counterpart, a shadow behind her spotlight. To the public, they were the perfect power couple. But behind closed doors, their marriage was a formality, an arrangement built more on ambition than affection. And though the world praised them as a match made in corporate heaven, the truth was far colder. David had been emotionally divorced from his wife long before the rumors of her affair ever reached him. So when David met Amaka, something shifted. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She didn't talk in circles or try to impress him. There was a quiet dignity in her that he recognized, because it mirrored his own. Their first conversation was brief but layered. Amaka thanked him for being present at the conference. He complimented her poise. They didn't mention their spouses, but the tension in their words made it clear they knew who they were to each other. It was Amaka who eventually reached out again, under the guise of a casual coffee. It turned into lunch, then a walk, then long conversations that dipped beneath the surface, where laughter slowly returned to their voices. What began as mutual understanding evolved into something far more dangerous, a quiet bond between two people broken by the same betrayal. David never pushed. He listened. He paid attention to things Kunle had long stopped noticing: Amaka's intelligence, her wit, her quiet fire. Amaka, in return, felt seen for the first time in years. Not as someone's wife, not as the woman who cooked and waited and forgave, but as herself. Their connection grew in the shadows, wrapped in caution and emotional restraint. But when David suggested they make it official, marry in secret, Amaka didn't flinch. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption. And as she stood beside David at a quiet registry office in Ikoyi, with only two witnesses and a hidden smile, Amaka made a silent vow. The game Kunle thought he was winning had just changed forever. The office retreat was meant to be a break from stress. 2 days at a luxury beach resort in Alash, sponsored by the company, packed with bonding activities, cocktails, and shallow smiles. For Kunle, it was the perfect chance to slip deeper into the fantasy. He was already planning how he'd sneak away with Mrs. Williams for their usual forbidden moments. Amaka, of course, wasn't supposed to be there. But when she appeared at the welcome dinner, dressed in a deep green satin gown that turned heads and left mouths slightly ajar, Kunle choked on his wine. "What is she doing here?" he whispered to a colleague. The answer was simple. Mrs. Williams had invited her as a guest speaker on women in business. Kunle forced a smile as he approached Amaka. She greeted him with warm eyes and a peck on the cheek, as if everything was normal. He couldn't tell if he was dreaming or drowning. The night dragged on, tension thick in the air, but the real explosion came the next afternoon. During a breakout session on emotional intelligence in the workplace, Mrs. Williams stood to speak about transparency and leadership. Her tone was cold, clipped, and oddly direct. "Trust is the foundation of every relationship," she said, scanning the room. "And betrayal, when discovered, has the power to destroy not just homes, but entire empires." Then she turned. "Isn't that right, Kunle?" The room froze. Eyes turned. A glass shattered somewhere. Kunle's voice trembled. "Ma?" "Mrs. Williams reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Photos, screenshots, hotel receipts. She tossed them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. "You thought I didn't know, didn't you?" she said. "You thought you were the only one playing this game?" Kunle's face drained of all color. But before he could speak, Amaka stood up. Calm, regal, unbothered. "That's enough," she said, walking slowly to the front of the room. "Yes, he betrayed you. But so did you to your husband. A stunned silence fell. Amaka reached into her own purse and pulled out a document, a marriage certificate. Stamped. Signed. Dated. I married your husband 2 months ago. And unlike you both, I did it in the light. Gasps. One of the interns fainted. Even the sea outside seemed to pause. David stepped forward from the back of the hall, adjusting his sleeves. He nodded politely to the crowd, walked over to Amaka, and held her hand. This wasn't about revenge, Amaka said, looking Kunle in the eyes. It was about closing one chapter and opening another. Kunle could barely breathe. The man who thought he had mastered deceit, who once juggled lies like trophies, now stood publicly exposed and outplayed by the very woman he underestimated. And that was when he realized the game wasn't his to begin with. Kunle didn't go home the night of the retreat's collapse. He sat in his car by the shoreline, staring into the darkness, his ego bleeding like an open wound. The once confident player, who prided himself on control, secrecy, and smooth lies, was now the center of public disgrace. Word spread fast. By sunrise, gossip blogs had picked up whispers from the retreat, and his colleagues no longer looked at him with admiration. Only pity. His phone rang endlessly. Calls from friends, from his mother, from colleagues pretending to check on him but desperate for details. He didn't answer. What would he even say? That his wife married the husband of the woman he was cheating with? Checkmate. Meanwhile, Amaka moved with grace through the storm. She never gloated, never mocked, never threw his humiliation in his face. She simply continued her life with her new husband, David. Quiet, stable David, who offered her peace Kunle never could. Mrs. Williams, on the other hand, resigned from her position a week later. The board couldn't risk the scandal spreading further. Her fall was swift and brutal. In public, she painted it as a personal decision for healing and growth. But in private, she was shattered. Her empire had cracked, not because of business failure, but because she thought herself untouchable. As for Kunle, his career took a nosedive. HR launched an internal investigation into his conduct, and clients requested reassignment. No one said it directly, but the message was clear. He was no longer the man they could trust. He tried reaching Amaka once. Just once. He stood outside her new home, holding a bouquet of white roses and a face full of regret. When she came to the gate, she looked at him, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with clarity. Kunle, she said softly, you always thought life was a game. But some of us were never playing. We were surviving. She turned and walked away, into the house she now shared with David, into the peace she earned, into the freedom she built for herself, not by fighting back with noise, but by letting truth do the talking. Kunle stood at the gate long after she closed the door, and for the first time in his life, he realized what it meant to lose completely.